And just shortly, I'm just going to shift my camera. So I'm just going to shift my face away and I'll give you this screen here. So if you click on my screen, you'll be able to see a little bit more of what it is. But in short, I'm born bred South African. I moved to Scandinavia some years back. And from there, I have delved in the stuff that I came from back home, which is arts, culture, um, uh, a lot of trying to survive in Scandinavia, and then also just kind of getting my fingers on almost everything that is print. Um, so I always greet. I mean, my emails are greeting like salam, sawubona, jambo, namaste, because these are threads in my lineage. But then just to quickly give you some insights, yeah, the collaboration with Jonelle has been really amazing. We've been ping-ponging like mad over email while COVID was, hindering us from actually being in front of each other. And before that, I've been delving around many things in the city. Actually, the zine here, Echo Zine, was kind of something that started off. Also a collaboration with the university here in Oost. Another publication that I was involved with was This Is Not Africa, which was an exhibition not too long ago at the Aarhus Kunsthal here in Aarhus. Yeah, I love print. I'm always printing or, trying to collaborate with people that print. In the past 10, 15 years, I've also been collecting and archiving zines. My misfortune, however, is that my zines are all in suitcases. But now and again in the year, they come out and I take them to festivals. Yeah, and that was just a short little run through of who and what I do. I'm going to hand over back to Janelle. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming again.
Thank you very much, Abdul. So a little bit of a background on the theme Black Space and what the zine is about and why that became the focus of this first issue. We talked a little bit or quite a lot on what space means to Black people. And I'm just going to share a quote by Catherine McKittrick, where she says, quote, "Black matters are spatial matters. Geographies in the diaspora are accentuated by racist paradigms of the past and their ongoing hierarchical patterns. And this idea of Black matters being always spatial is something that we held on to. This idea of racial violence being always connected to our spatiality is an important starting point for thinking about how space influences Black people's realities and daily life and experiences. But at the same time, we also wanted to think about space as a creative resource for us to create and imagine other possibilities and realities beyond the violence that is embedded in our current material space. So the idea of the possibilities and limitations of space is what has shaped the zine. And through that, we asked different contributors to send in contributions that deals with this topic, both explicitly and implicitly, to help us tease at least an introduction of the topic. And I will hand it over to Abdul to share a bit more of our creative process throughout to make this zine a possibility.
Yeah. So welcome to that last person, Yasmin. I just gave it a click so you can come in. Hi. Yeah. I mean, the process was, COVID was quite a big hindrance, but we worked around it and with it. And so our main aspect for collaborating was basically finding folks within our networks. And making sure that we do not put any added pressure onto them in having to create, or like we didn't want to commission anyone to do anything out of the ordinary. We really wanted to handle or yeah, handle is a good word for now, handle what they were busy with, what was occupying them. And so through this filter of black space, and I must tell you, like a lot of in betweens of also reading bits of text and going through imagery, we finally got to this kind of black space. And so the layout was particularly funny in a way, because we started off just collecting stuff. We made the open call, and then we got works and contributions in, um, and from there, let me just see. I can actually give you a bit of a squiggle into. I'm gonna have to change camera quickly. Yeah. So we were able to um, really play with this idea of who would join us. And I'm just going to give those that are here just a quick squiggle, because I've got a web version of the zine with me. And so important to mention here is we really wanted to make sure that how people speak, or what they speak, or what they're busy with was the content that was going to be occupying the pages of the zine. Just a little bit on these on the graphics that I started using at the end was me just wanting to like play with the idea. I mean, we had this other quote in our heads actually, another world is possible, and that was a lot in our heads, and that formulated quite a lot. I made some far out worlds imagery, but Jonelle was like, yeah, maybe let's not posit it that way. And then going back and forth in between, we got down to this kind of these abstractions and these almost microscopic worlds that you're seeing in the back, kind of world, kind of weird image. And what there is, if I can just break the ice, is that I've been playing with spray paint on water, and then kind of coating like things with the paint. And when I rework these images, they kind of get into these kind of worldly, weird world things. Yeah, I mean, a lot of reading got us going. I mean, I know for myself, and on the editor's page or editor's note, I made a bit of a world map, a mind map, just to kind of give you a sense of like, all these trajectories or these points that we were trying to look at, and also trying to give us a sense of, what do we add, what do we don't add. But the more that the work came in, the more the contributors were also shaping our heads and shaping our ideas of like how we need to present what we will be presenting in the zine here. And so I'm just giving a very quick skip through because at this moment there is a few places that have our distribution, but with COVID, things just needs to move at a different pace. So shortly, everyone should be able to have one in their hands. And you can see the imagery that I've kept was, I wanted to make more concentration on people's contribution, and backgrounds was important because I didn't want to just let it lay on this kind of white space. And so galaxies formed around certain works actually just worked better by having a white space. And there's this reoccurrence of this image that is both organic and also not organic. One of the major things that I wanted to make sure also is for us to have portals or links outside of the zine. So outside of the paper, with you having a supercomputer in your hand, you can now kind of zap onto these codes. Further in the zine, the contributor, a friend of mine in South Africa, Michael, we've laced some of their works to have a more AR experience, augmented reality experience. So there's a trigger within the zine that will take you to a short like video or an audio, while also Michael and I were having discussions of like, what do we include or what do we do with their work. I'm just looking at it now that it's only single page view, but I don't want to get into technicalities right now. But yeah, so these works, especially certain ones of these, are triggered once you have the software loaded onto your phone. I think shortly within the future, maybe all phones would actually have this recognition element in it. They will all have AI capabilities built into them. But for now, you have to put a small piece of software onto your phone to kind of get the triggering to happen, and something else will come out of it. We're doing this because there is no way from hiding away from technology right now. So we better embrace it and kind of occupy these spaces that are not yet overtly white. And so, making a statement by also kind of, taking over or taking space in these worlds that we can also create, and the worlds that we have control over. So yeah, this one is maybe just what I want to point at, is that Jonelle and I also organized a small zine workshop where we made zines with some locals in Malmö. And then I also wanted to make sure to share this kind of experience with you. So on this page particularly, there is a really nice little recipe on the side where you can take one A4 piece of paper, and basically you can take any size of piece of paper that you find in your copy shop. And with these particular folds, you'd be able to kind of create a zine without using staples. And also this formula or this recipe allows you to quickly be able to kind of duplicate whatever you've got on your mind, and able to quickly kind of disseminate them in and around your community. We didn't want to just be textual, so there's also quite a strong visual and also text image combination in the sense of comics that have also taken space. And then a DJ collective back home called Future Nostalgia also gave me permission to utilize a series of mixes they made not too long ago concerning South Africa and the music from the Black communities there. So again, here you use your phone to kind of zap into a space where you can listen to these soundscapes. And like, I'm not going to say which one is my favorite because all of them are. There is particularly this one that I would say, if you can get your hands on the zine, that would be a really good idea. This one here, it's called Rotations of Bismillah. And the soundscape is just fucking beautiful. So if you have time, chill out, switch it on, and then just kind of delve into this world. Yeah, that's enough for me.
Thank you very much, Abdul, for the presentation of the zine. So what we have structured up for today is that we have a few of the contributors of the zine with us today. And we'll have them share some of their contributions with you. And afterwards, there'll be a few minutes left where you can ask them questions. You can ask us questions about the zine, about the theme, and then we will wrap it up. We will be starting off with Rudy, and Rudy will unfortunately have to leave after they share their contribution, but we'll have space directly after their contribution so you can ask them questions if you have any questions for them. And after, we'll continue with the other contributors. And apart from these contributors, there's over 10 other contributors that you can read their contribution in the zine once you have a copy of your own. So I'm going to leave the floor for Rudy. They'll share a bit of the context of their contribution, and yeah.
Hi, I'm Rudy Lowe. I'm a visual artist, and my pronoun is they, them. And I contributed this 3-page comic, which was originally made for the Swedish magazine Ottar. And it's a conversation between an elder and a young person talking about the importance of our stories, basically. And it was originally written in English and then translated into Swedish. I'm going to translate it back into English, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, so it's called To Tell Our Histories. We've always created our own histories. It's just that those who have the power in museums and archives have told another history. Sometimes people ask me, why are you sharing this history now? We've told our stories all of our lives, but it's just depends on who has heard them and who's been listening. Around the whole world, people share oral histories, their stories that we've taken from generation to generation, the stories of our communities and our people that they can't take away from us. So often, museums tell the stories of plundering, violence, and colonialism, everything contained in a beautiful glass case. But the other version of histories that you don't see in but the version of history that you see in museums is not the whole truth. How do you think those items got there? Maybe they were presents? No, love. They were stolen. This is what colonialism means: to steal land, people, and the things as if they were theirs. But that's terrible. Yeah, it is. And that's why we need to continue telling our stories that we know are true, so that people don't forget them. And it's therefore that it's important that older people like me tell to young people like you, so that you can take them forward. Have I told you before about Jessica Huntley? No. She grew up in Guyana like me. Jessica and her husband were revolutionaries. What does revolutionary mean? It's a person who fights for what they know is right and true, even if it's against what everyone else says. I want to be a revolutionary. So Jessica came to England, and her husband started to sell books from their living room so that people could read books on the Caribbean and African people. Later, they started a bookshop so that people could come and learn about their histories, and they would hold events and Saturday schools. More school. There, it was possible to learn things about Black people that as children we weren't learning in school, like where our people came from. Their bookshop was such an important place. They published their own books from the community, even children. Children? Yeah, even children, love. I want to publish books when I'm older. Why wait? What would it be about? I want my book to be about a child like me who is not a boy or a girl, just a child. That sounds perfect, love. Let's do it.
Beautiful reminder. Thanks again for and even further.
Thank you so much, Rudy. Very beautiful contribution. As Rudy will have to leave, and thank you for doing the double translation from that was super professional, like great job. If anyone have questions for Rudy, because they unfortunately will have to leave us, please do ask them that before they leave. You can just unmute yourself. You can also write in the chat if you want to. Okay. I think you're free now, Rudy. Thank you so much for joining.
Yes. Sorry, I'm not well, so I'm going to go back to my sick bed.
Feel better soon, and thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for
Thanks so much. All the best.
Bye.
Tschüss.
Okay, so we are now going to hand over the stage to Fatuma, who will be reading a bit of her contribution, Flyktvägar hem, for us.
Thank you, Jonelle. Thank you, Abdul, and thank you everybody that's here today on this fabulous release. Thank you for making this scene. Wow. It's an honor to be a part of it. And my contribution is kind of a collage of different poems that I have cut and pasted. And some have been published before and some have never been published. So I'm gonna read in English to start with. And the translation is made by a friend. I love working collectively. So Ylva, thank you. And my poems center mostly about Blackness, migration, and mothering in different ways. Okay, so we'll just start. The year when one does not really know what can take one's life, or if everything can at once. The year when one does not really know what can take one's life, or if everything can at once. At the moment that I'm writing this, I don't only feel overwhelmed about what is going on politically in the world, from Tigray to Washington to the permanent necropolitics of Europe, within and outside its territory. It is the year when the world's focus was pathology, the year distance got a new meaning, the year white bodies too became numbers, the year when many more shared the uncertainties. Some of us a decision from the migration board, some of us whether we can see and be close to the people we love. The year my daughter was born, the year I looked up to the Malmö sky and saw the police helicopter circulating over my head as I'm jogging, thinking, what if I match a signalement and they shoot? The year one does not really know what can take one's life, or if everything can at once. Tread carefully, carefully. We do not know if we can make it there to catch you. Papaya is eaten with lime and sugar, like my mother and grandmother taught me. I want to call out to my ancestors, the ones I directly descend from and the ones I have chosen. I want to join in conversation with you about how Blackness shapes your bodies, your walk, your speech, and how this double awareness has shaped the Black body. Black migration and Black diaspora in the Nordic countries and Sweden. What escape routes are accessible to us? The oppressed and colonized. How is the aesthetics created in the prevailing order? How can we use erotics to understand they are workers and then they are workers? How does one write a poem of pathology and papaya? What does a poem like that say about us? What had my grandmother said, not what my mother had said. She had said that, like the papaya tree, we bear fruits bigger than we can carry. Yet we stand firm, generation after generation. We stand firm, eating, which is eating us. And I'll switch over to Swedish. Jag ska mödra på andra sätt än tidigare. Bli en moder genom min kropp, föda en individ, person i en värld jag är rädd för. Jag vet inte hur extrem den kommer bli, för det är kroppar vi utgör. Hur extremt måste vårt mödrande vara? Hur mödrar vi något annat utan att reproducera det vi fruktar? Hur mödrar vi monstruöst? Hur mödrar vi häxor? Hur mödrar vi queers? Hur mödrar vi socialism? Hur mödrar vi det som inte förgör oss? Den svarta enhörningen är inte fri. The black unicorn is not free. Så vi döper er till namn som kan härledas till era förfäder, vackra namn som bygger murar runt er. Likt Palestinas barn sjunger ni om murens fall. En dag raserar ni dem alla. Hur ser estetiken inom den rådande nekropolitiken ut? Den tvingar vissa människor att leva i tillstånd mellan liv och död. Reducerar dem till prekära livsförhållanden. Hur mår du? How are you? Våldet passerar i oss så ni kan tänka er hur vi ser ut på insidan. Ta mig till den mark som min mamma och hennes mamma kallar hem. Min mor säger, en sådan plats har aldrig funnits. Marken har aldrig tillhört någon. Bröstet, en plats att vila och lämna sina krig. Tack, thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatuma. Thank you for such a powerful text that still feels a lot every time I read or hear it. Thank you so much. And also the skillfully moving between languages. That's just amazing. Thank you for that. And yeah, something that I forgot to share before, the zine is written in multiple languages. So as we move on from Fatuma's beautiful poem and text, we'll be going over to Yahya, who will be reading in both English and Arabic. Thank you again, Fatuma.
Hey, Jonelle, and thank you for making this, and thank you for making this happen. Thank you, Abdul, and I'm just like very grateful and very honored to be part of this. When I got asked to contribute with a text about Black space, I thought of like space as something that I've always started within me, and before starting in a physical space around me. And whenever I felt uncomfortable in a space, I just imagine another space. And books, and I was an introvert kid. I'm not much of an introvert right now, but when I was a kid, I was very introvert, and like I was just escaping in books. I was born in and raised in Cairo, for a family originates from a village right on the border between Egypt and Sudan. Borders written by, or like put by, the British colonizers. And I moved to Sweden 8 years ago. And when I moved to Sweden, I moved to Malmö, a city that is right on the border between Sweden and Denmark. And when I was writing this text, I was planning a trip back to Cairo to visit my family after 2 years of pandemic. So I started writing the text in Malmö, and I finished the text in Cairo. So it was just all in all a coincidence that it was extremely fitting, the idea. I wrote the text in 2 languages. They are not translating, the paragraphs are not translating each other. You will only be able to read the full text if you can read English and Arabic. And if you only can read one language of them, so you will only get half of it. That was my way of creating, conveying the sense of alienation and the sense of also like the third culture kid, that you always need to navigate between different culture and speak different languages. And it was also a reminder for me that none of these languages are my mother tongue. Both are the languages of a colonizer that I adapted and I love at the same time and have strange relationship to. The text is called Living on the Edge. I remember us sitting in a leftist coffee shop in Lisbon. It was 4 of us, my best friend and 2 of his friends that I met for the first time on this trip. I went to the bathroom and came back to be surprised by my friend asking me to tell them more about edging, the sexual act. I remember myself enjoying the act of telling my story, but I wasn't sure if I ever told my friend about me loving to edge, or what was it that triggered the question. But I just went on talking. Living on the edge is fun, I think. أتذكر كيف عشت حياتي على الحدود الاجتماعية بهويتي الكويرية وببشرتي السمراء وعائلتي النوبية. عائلتي النوبية البسيطة التي نجحت في تسلق السلم الاجتماعي والمنحدرة من قرية قسمتها حدود الاحتلال الإنجليزي إلى قسم مصري وآخر سوداني. عندما انتقلت إلى السويد اخترت العيش في مالمو قرب الحدود مع الدنمارك، وكأنها الحدود تجذبني إليها، وكأنني أهوى العيش على الحافة وأكره التقيد بهوية واحدة. Edging is something I learned before knowing it existed. I slowly realized I can prolong my pleasure, reaching the edge of orgasm, to abruptly stop before reaching it. Simultaneously, I also learned how to prolong my existence, rather my non-existence, beyond the borders of one identity, navigating different realities, knowing what to do and when to fit in or to pass. At a younger age, alienating was too painful. It was so painful that I couldn't realize the pain until I stopped my trials to fit in and accepted my non-conformity. عندما كنت صغيرا لم أكن أهوى الاختلاف، فكل ذكرياتي مع الاختلاف كانت مليئة بالتنمر والخوف. الخوف من أن يكتشف أهلي هويتي، الخوف من أن يلمح أترابي إلى مؤخرتي التي تشبه مؤخرات النساء، الخوف من أن أعبر عن فهمي المختلف لعلاقتي بربي، الخوف من أن ينعتني أصدقائي بالعبد، الخوف من أن ينعتني أبناء قريتي بالقاهري، الخوف من أن أكون أفقر ممن أريد مصادقتهم، الخوف من أن أكون أعقد ممن يشاركونني الحديث كل يوم. لذا صارت الكتب هي أنيسي على الحافة ورفيقي إلى المعرفة. I taught myself edging because I liked how being horny felt. The continuous stimulation of my body, being hard and more sensitive and ready to ejaculate and remaining in a pre-ejaculation euphoria. Staying in this state where touching myself is more enjoyable than reaching orgasm was very powerful for a teenager who was always being told that he cannot be anything else but what they want him to be. Edging gave me control over something I was told I couldn't control. Edging taught me how to use my body the way I want and to enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yahya, for this beautiful text of how to use the erotic to navigate alienation. Thank you so much for that. And also, like, talking about both the limitations of language and how to navigate that, or attempt to navigate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to move on to our last contributor from joining us from New York today, Jess. Let me pin you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and also for inviting me to be a part of this very beautiful project. I really appreciate it. You know, different ways of expressing international solidarities across diaspora are always really interesting to me, really fruitful to me. Also, I see that there are a number of people in this group who I miss dearly. So it's really a pleasure to be here and a little bit emotional as well. So I wrote a text about bastards because I love them, and also because there's a quote from Baldwin from Native Son that talks about Black diaspora in the West is really the bastards of the West, and I had been turning over what that meant and what that meant to me, possibly in the context of just like loving sneakiness. I'm just someone who loves sneaky things and sneaky behavior. Very Scorpio of me, I think. So yeah. So what I like about it is to not always have to be exposed, and also to be able to handle the Western canon in a way that's not respectful. Like to think of it as like, this is another thing to use, as opposed to being like a Black person in the West is something that you need to be like massively grateful for, but really seeing it as something that a positionality that can be used and that can shapeshift in a lot of ways, where, you know, you can look at code switching or mask switching as sort of like a strategic state as well, as opposed to just like, oh, this is so burdensome, which it definitely is, but also to think about it as like, this is something that I can use and see and manipulate in ways that others can't. and thinking about that as a strength. So I'm going to read just a part of it. Yeah, so that's it. So this is from a piece called I Can Be a Real Bastard Sometimes. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a quote from Baldwin, and he says, I know in any case that the most critical time in my own development came when I was forced to recognize that I was kind of a bastard of the West. When I followed the line of my past, I did not find myself in Europe, but in Africa. And this meant that in some subtle way, in a really profound way, I brought to Shakespeare, Bach, Rembrandt, to the stones of Paris, to the Cathedral of Chartres, to the Empire State Building, a special attitude. These were not really my creations. They did not contain my history. I might search in them in vain forever for any reflection of myself. I was an interloper. This was not my heritage. At the same time, I had no other heritage which I could possibly hope to use. I had certainly been unfitted for the jungle or the tribe. I would be appropriate. I would have to appropriate these white centuries. I would have to make them mine. I would have to accept my special attitude, my special place in the scheme. Otherwise, I would have no other place, no place in any scheme. James Baldwin, Notes of a Native Son. I love the archetype of bastards. And I'm not talking about any child born out of wedlock, but rather the predestined, the tragic, the spare, the aristocratic figure born so close to power and yet barred from it by circumstance of birth. These figures are so useful, pillars of resentment and ambition, a trickster and an operator, precarious and shunned. All the excitement of the underdog with none of the sentimentality. It might be the result of a Christian upbringing, but I draw deep satisfaction from the character who is crushed and tormented only to go off in some dark corner where it is best to coil and plot, reconfiguring its own future in spite of others' neglect. This is a far better creature than the dull face of simple respectability, tipped smilingly up to any source of authority, bruised cheeks burning from being turned so often. One of the more intriguing things about the great bastards of history or literature is the anxiety that they inspire from those in power. The anxiety that a creation of one's own making may rise up at some auspicious moment and inherit the power denied them. This is the origin anxiety of the great replacement theory. No one would march around spilling ink or losing their voice over the possibility of being replaced if someone out there didn't have at least a bit of a right to do that replacing. And every once in a while, they manage it. There always exists that 1 in 1 million bastard who maneuvers their way to full inheritance. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jess, for such a beautiful contribution and making us think about the bastard in new, interesting, and provocative ways. Thank you so much for that. We are now going to invite all the contributors. Let's see, so we can have a bit of a talk. You can ask them questions about their works. You can ask us questions about the zine, and we'll try and do our best to answer them for you. So you can just unmute yourself and pop in a question or type it in the chat if you would rather prefer that. So, and as we wait for some questions to come in, I'm just going to share a bit more about where to get the zine right now. Right now, the zine is available at Malmö Konsthall and will be available in physical copies in other bookshops in Malmö, Copenhagen, and Stockholm, and we'll be updating you as these information comes up. So just stay tuned on our social media and we will be getting the information, and hopefully we'll be able to also ship it in the future to other places. Those of you who do not live in these cities, we are working on that. Maybe I can ask you, Fatuma, Jess, and Yahya, a question. Yeah. How do you relate to the theme Black Space? And how do you see your contribution in relation to that? If you've had any reflections on.
Do you want to start, Fatima, or can I answer? Yeah, I think I relate to Black Space or to the theme because I think my blackness have always been questioned. I think being born and raised in an Arab country or Arabic speaking country, blackness is not always seen as something that relates. I've been always asked where I come from, even in my home country. I've been asked like, yeah, but are you Sudanese or are you really Egyptian? And even when I moved to Sweden, I can see like, I could hear some Arabic speaking people talking about me in Arabic, thinking that I don't understand Arabic because I don't look like an Arab to them. So they think that I wouldn't understand. So blackness has always been my identity. But even this have always been questioned. Like I had some people telling me, but you're not that dark, you're not that black, you're light skinned. And so it's always have been a contested identity for me, from others, not from my side. And I think I enjoy spaces where I can see other Black people more than anything. Even if I don't understand a word of what they're saying, I just enjoy being there because I feel like I fit in. I had like Brazilian people coming talking to me in Brazilian Portuguese because they think I pass as Brazilian, and they assume that I can speak Portuguese. And I was then like, I said, no, I'm not. And I was like, but how? You look like one of us. I was like, yeah, unfortunately, I'm not yet. So for me, space, then again, take it back to my childhood, is something that if I couldn't find it in a physical space, I always imagine it. So it was my escape, fantasy and space. If this answers your question.
Beautifully, thank you very much, Yahya.
Yeah, the awkward Zoom silence. I feel like on my end of things, I'm often really frustrated by the idea of Black space in the context of the United States, because it's often, so my background is architecture and city planning, and it's often commodified, right? So the way that it's sort of used is like, oh, we've discovered that oppression exists, so we need to find some kind of Black to like deal with this. And then they'll be like, okay, we need the object of Blackness, or we need the object of Black space. And like Blackness itself, especially in the space of architectural thinking and of, urbanist thinking, is always seen as the object and never the lens. It's always seen as sort of like this thing to consume, as opposed to a frame of analysis, that's actually incredibly sophisticated, and able to offer perspective, or able to offer forms of knowledge or create forms of knowledge that have not been considered in these spaces that are deeply rigorous, So sometimes when I hear Black space, it's just like, oh God, the administration of some university has decided to like cart this out another time without really considering what it is or what it does, or what it very generously and deeply unremunerated in many ways, has been offering for a long time. So, you know, I am often fighting in my own department as faculty for the things that I do or say, or the practice that I have, to even be seen as architecture, to even be seen as urbanism. So sometimes, you know, I think about, like, I would love to just teach a very mundane class, like an intro to city planning, and just have every reference be like Black poetry, and not call it Black poetics of urbanism, or like, but like, actually this is a lens through which, at the very base level, especially in the United States, that the city needs to be understood, and that the city has already been analyzed and sort of problematized and had knowledge made from. I often, and I guess this goes back to my love of sneakiness, feels like sometimes it gives the game away, to like give it a name that can be consumed or can be commodified. But to use kind of the language, or to use sort of like mundanity as this kind of screen for pushing towards the edge, I think can be fruitful. So I guess I have like a conflicted relationship with Black space, where it's just like, I feel like I understand or am impatient for it to be recognized for what it can actually do and actually does, and have to fight against the sort of commodity of it.
And it's so interesting what you mentioned, like just naming something like Black poetics of whatever, that draws into the urge of consumption, of wanting to come there to consume Blackness, and what that can do to you, whilst having a basic title will derail these the vultures. Thank you very much, Jess. We Mabatu Tawanda Samuel, please go ahead.
Hey.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So first of all, thank you so much to all of you. I want to thank Fatuma for the poetry and for bringing Black migration, Black death from Tigray to everywhere we're seeing to the stage. Thank you so much. Yahya, for bringing Black queerness in the space. Thank you. And my question is for Jess. Hey, girl. Just speaking of, or departing from what you were saying, I was just thinking about like the space of Black internationalism, like James Baldwin, you know, talking about being the bastard of the West as Black people. And then, I mean, my relationship to James Baldwin, global Blackness, has been so enriched by questioning my role, or our role as Black people in the West, as products of the West, which is a violent kind of, you know, product. But departing from that, what would you say is like, is Black internationalism a sort of like response to this bastardness? If you understand it. Thank you so much. And I miss you.
I miss you so much. Yeah, so I think that's such a good question, because I think that sort of where Baldwin started was a place to like pick up from. The thing that he did, that he sort of seeded, and if I think about sort of Black intellectualism that sort of pushed the concept of sort of like a Black globe, is this, I think a lot of time was spent with the kind of Kwame Appiah, like cosmopolitism camp, where it's just like, oh, I can have a hometown all over the world. It's like, not if you're broke, you can't. Like, that's it's a very like, I think it was pushed in this very kind of like elite direction of just like, oh, Black internationalism is like jetting all around the world and like living in Paris and like blah, blah, blah. But like Baldwin was broke in Paris. Like, he had no money, he was arrested, he had to like steal bed sheets, like all of this stuff. Like, it wasn't like a glamorous lifestyle. Like, I think that he was building a really important intellectual community, but it was definitely not through like being elite. That being said, the thing that the form of internationalism that Baldwin is positing is not just to be like, oh, I can consume, again, going back to consumption, like I can consume all of these sort of international luxuries as a Black person, and that means that I've arrived onto some kind of international stage. I think the idea is also that you get to choose how you interact with this canon, and it doesn't have to be in this like big respectability to politics kind of way of just like, oh, I have to revere Shakespeare, I have to revere Bach, I have to be really impressed by the cathedral at Chartres. I think he's like giving a permission to find a pathway to power through disregard or like rudeness as well, to be like, yeah, this is cute, but like there's other things to be done or whatever, but like not seeing it as like, this is my aspiration, like this kind of rigid Western canon is my aspiration. It can be, this is a thing that I can use, and I can use it alongside all of these other things. So I was really enjoying the conversation on language, because it's sort of the same thing of like not seeing, let's say English is like, English is so beautiful and like whatever, or like we must respect all the great writers of English. Like not all, like English is just lingua franca, it's just a way to sort of like claw understanding through through borders or through different language traditions. And it doesn't have to be seen in this like pure, untouchable way. I think that Baldwin is sort of giving folks permission to like be disrespectful and also to like use things in the way that you want, as opposed to the way that you're being told to like handle things with kid gloves, but to like actually touch things beyond the like no touching, museum sign.
Do we have any more questions for these brilliant people while we have them here?
I mean, if I may, maybe just the obvious one sitting on the tip of my tongue is so further readings, further Yahya, further Fatuma, further Jess. Where do we get it? How do we get it? I mean, where where?
I don't know. You tell me. I don't know. I think I've been not confident enough in my writing skills, that I've never wrote that much. But I think it's I'm deciding to start on doing this more and more now. So hopefully more and more will come. But until now, maybe a blog, maybe something online, or maybe a book. I don't know. Hopefully soon.
What about you, Fatuma?
Yeah, I've been in some Nordic magazines. So you can find Kritiken, number 56, I think, and Astra as well. I've also contributed to this book. Jag har tänkt mycket på oss och våra utmattade kroppar, that I've written with Andrea Malesovic about mothers and work, that we're also talking about a conversation, like letters to each other about our mothers and upbringing. And yeah, Antirasistiska Akademin, I wrote a text about anti being against something and being for something. And yeah, a community. Yeah, some stuff, but not a book, but you can find some stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatuma. What about you, Jess?
Yeah, so I write a lot in like architecture space, which is not, thankfully, of interest to everybody. So you can find some of my work in like the Architects newspaper, L'Architecture d'aujourd'hui. But you can also find my podcast, which would be interesting, I think, to anyone who is living in Stockholm. We did a season about Stockholm. The podcast is called Here There Be Dragons, season 3. is Stockholm. So if that is of interest to you, please go check it out. Yeah, I interviewed Samuel actually for that podcast. So yeah, if it's of interest, it's on iTunes, SoundCloud, anywhere that you might want to stream it.
Can you share a bit about the series that you did on Stockholm? Just brief.
Yeah, so on the architecture and urbanism side of things that I'm interested in, ways that I work on a podcast called Here There Be Dragons, where the sort of jumping off point is thinking about how city residents consider their own safety. And safety is such an interesting question because it always wheedles its way into all kinds of different political concerns. So we end up kind of exploring the city through where different residents feel a sense of ownership or a sense of welcome versus where they're feeling excluded, and why. And then we kind of lace those interviews together through sound design, as well as interviews with urbanists and architects and researchers around space. So if you're interested in any of that, we spoke to about 45 Stockholmers of different ages, living in different parts of the city, different races, ethnicities, religions from all over the place, sort of coming together, voices coming together in the show to kind of tell a story of Stockholm. So if that interests you, it was a fantastic time. It was the most fun field research I've done in a very long time. And I hope to be able to come back to Stockholm to talk about findings from that season.
Thank you very much, Jess. If there's no final question, I would like to thank all the contributors, Rudy, Yahya, Jess, Fatuma for joining us today, and all of you for joining us this Wednesday evening to hear a bit about the zine. And Yahya just commented he's written a chapter in an anthology published by Malmö University about Malmö queer history, a very beautiful chapter. Thank you all for coming to hear about the zine, and you can find the zine very soon. I have a blurry background, but if any of you have the zine available with no blurry background, you can find it very soon in a bookshop in Malmö, Stockholm, Copenhagen, and hopefully in other cities. We'll keep you updated on social media when they start showing up. But right now in Malmö, we have it at the Konshall, Malmö Konshall. Yes.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone. It's been, the readings have just been beautiful, so thanks for putting the sonics onto it as well. Yeah, much appreciated.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful evening, everyone. Bye. Thank you.
A nice day, nice evening.